What's up, guys? It's Deflate. Today, we're going to be talking about how your stance affects your squats. But first, a little bit update. I've been super sick past week or so. Lost about 10 pounds. So that's the reason I haven't really been posting like that. But we're going to be talking about this today and hopefully get better, get well soon here. I start my peaking this coming week. So I'll be posting again my Road to 600 series after that, and then hopefully we can make some gains. But to talk today about how your stance affects your squats. We're talking about a couple different things. We're talking about wide stance, narrow stance. We're also going to talk about bar placement as far as low bar or high bar for this video. So let's get into it. So to start out with, we're going to be talking about wide stance. Now, wide stance, of course, I'm talking about our, feet being in excess of wider than our shoulders. So what are we trying to do if we're trying to put our feet that wide? For some people, like myself, it's just the only way that we can comfortably sink into a squat. I find that, having my feet super wide, I can really get deep into a squat where I cannot do with something like a narrow stance squat. And that's just me. That's how my hips are. That's how my femurs insert into my hips. So it works for different people. But if you're someone that has no problem, squatting in a different way, and you're thinking about wide stance squat, just know this is going to be a glute and lower back bias squat rather than your quads. Your glutes and lower back are going to take over more of the work. And typically you're going to get much more bent over in the squat. That's also why your glutes and lower back take over so much of that work. The upsides, obviously, if you're someone that's working to develop their lower back and their glutes more, not as worried about the quads, that can definitely be a benefit for you. So next, of course, we're going to talk about narrow stance squat. And narrow stance squat is when you're going to have your feet very close together. Not everybody can do this type of narrow stance squat without some kind of modifications, whether it's putting weights underneath your heel, having your heel elevated, that kind of thing. Me personally, I really can struggle to get into that squat with no weight on at all. But doing this, that's going to definitely bias our quads a ton more. Most people that are squatting this stance, it's crucial that you can really push your knees past your toes. Otherwise, you're going to have a ton of lower back rounding. While wide stance squats is much more forgiving if you don't have very flexible ankles. So that's also why a ton of people, especially nowadays where most people have very stiff ankles and joints, not very flexible, because they sit all day at their job or they're not doing a whole lot of other things, tend to be able to just squat in a wide stance much easier. I do believe that most people can get to a point where they can do a pretty decent job in a narrow stance squat. And then of course you have just a normal stance squat, wherever it feels comfortable to you, and that's going to be somewhere, in between these two. That's not going to bias the glutes or the quads. It's going to be an all-around developer. So that's really just personal preference based on what your anatomy allows you to do, and what your preferences are. Obviously, if you're someone that is wanting to push the weight, trying to squat as much as you can, a wide stance is probably going to be more beneficial for you. Typically, in wider stance, you're going to be able to lift more weight per rep. But, everyone's different, so it really just depends on you. Next, we're talking about low bar versus high bar squat. Of course, when I'm talking about low bar, high bar squat is where it's sitting here on your traps, and then low bar is when it's sitting all the way down here on your rear delts. And what are we looking at here? So it's really just a matter of how close the bar is to our hips in the bottom of the squat. That's the real difference maker. A high bar squat is going to have you much more upright, while a low bar squat is going to have you much more bent over. If you're like me, very long limb, very short torso, squatting wide stance with a low bar, you almost get folded like a pretzel in the bottom of the squat, and then you have to get out of it. But that works for me. It works for my type of body type. It's not for everyone, obviously. Someone with a much longer torso is, probably going to feel a bit more inclined towards a high bar squat, just because they might not be as comfortable getting so bent over in a squat with all that weight on their back. But that's really up to you, and it really just depends on the person. But ultimately, especially if you're not someone that's competing, it's whatever squat is most comfortable for you. If you are someone that wants to compete or has aspirations to, squat a certain amount of weight, then, I can definitely recommend you, a wide stance squat and a low bar squat. But if you're someone that's simply going in there, just working out, wanting to stay healthy and everything, it's really whatever squat that you feel the most comfortable with, and you're able to do it without having, any issues down the road. And I think that's something important to keep in mind. And also, of course, this is just talking about normal barbell squats. If you're someone that would prefer doing something like a hack squat or, a different kind of squat using a machine or something, that's completely okay too. But for the purpose of this video, hope you guys learned something about wide and narrow stance squats. And yeah, hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Make sure you guys like and subscribe for more content.